The dinosaur head is now unwrapped, but you still need a proper bitmap to replace the checkered pattern. You'll use the UV layout to render out a template that you use as reference to paint a texture in Photoshop or your favorite paint application. We'll be using Adobe Photoshop in this movie, but what you're about to learn can be potentially done in other paint applications as well. Continue working on your file or use the scene named UV Unwrapping Dino Head Template.max. Make sure the dino head is selected and isolated, and open the UV editor. With the UV coordinates in place, choose Tools, Render UVW Template. Set the resolution based on your requirements. For this tutorial, we'll use 1024 by 1024 pixels. Leave all other options to their defaults and click the Render UV Template button. You get a rendering of your UV layout that you can save out and open in Photoshop. Before you do so, let's explore some other options. In the Mode drop-down list, try the Solid option and render the template again. As the name implies, this gives you shaded clusters to use as reference should you prefer this look. What's interesting about this mode is that it gives you feedback when it encounters overlapping edges or faces. These problem areas are shaded in red, and you can use that knowledge to correct the offending vertex placements. You can render again to ensure all overlapping problems are solved. There are other modes to choose from, but aside of using Solid to test out overlapping, most artists use the None mode to render out the final template. However, when you save the template to disk, make sure you use a file format that stores alpha information, such as TGA, TIFF, or PNG. In this movie, we'll use the PNG file format. Name the file mytemplate.png. Make sure it's set to 24-bit and that the alpha channel option is enabled. A similar file named template.png has been provided, should you need it. When you open the file in Photoshop, notice that only the wireframe UV data is visible. The black background is nowhere to be seen. This is courtesy of the alpha channel you saved in the PNG file. This way, you can separate the background from the foreground. This means you can still add a separate background to see the template better. Add a layer underneath the current one, and fill it with a solid color, such as black. You can also rename the layers for good measure. From this point forward, you can create other layers and use your favorite paint tools and brushes to create the needed textures. However, since this tutorial is more about unwrapping than painting, we won't dwell on that. Mind you, you can also do a collage of textures from other pictures. For example, consider this image of rusted metal that is provided to you. Since the building is quite old already, let's stick with that rundown look. You can select Ctrl-A and copy Ctrl-C this image to disk and paste it into your template as a new layer. Just make sure the layer is below the UV coordinates. Actually, you can leave it just as it looks right now or adjust and warp the image to your liking. You can even add to it with more collage parts. Add the eye by copying data from the dinoeye.png file. Play with blending modes and/or color correction to ensure a good integration. Once you're happy with the results, you can hide the UV template, flatten the layers, and save the image out as a JPEG file. You can have a bit more fun with it. For example, you can desaturate the image to turn it to grayscale. After that, you can adjust the levels to create and save out a bump map. Once the texture and the bump maps are done, you can go back to 3ds Max and rework the material for the dino head. I didn't dwell on the eyes, so you can work them out on your own as a final assignment. You'll need to apply the same material you used for the head, apply an Unwrap UVW modifier, apply simple planar mappings on the appropriate polygons, and position the clusters in the appropriate places. Of course, for even more sophisticated 3D painting and normal map generation, you could potentially use Autodesk Mudbox. This is, however, beyond the scope of this tutorial. If you run into trouble, you can always open the finished file and study it. In this tutorial, you took a thorough look at unwrapping UV coordinates for 3 different types of models. You learned to unwrap simple architectural structures by using mostly planar projections. You learned to manage technical models in the shape of a sports car, which required more explicit cutting and separation. And you finally worked on an organic model that requires even more complex flattening and relaxing. Finally, you learned how to render out a template that can be used to verify your work, and that you can also use as a reference for painting textures in a paint application. We hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, and we hope these techniques will help you in your work. We'll be back with more topics and more tutorials soon.